Welcome back, Life Sciences. I hope you enjoyed that short break. You know what I always say, get that oxygen going through the blood vessels, through the heart pumping, what we're doing now. Right, so guys, what are we looking at today? Right, so we're looking at the blood vessels. We looked at this concept of the heart, which is this muscular pump that's going to beat the blood right around the body, but we have this closed circulatory system, and our blood has to stay inside these structures that we call blood vessels. All right, and we looked at, just before the break, we looked at what a blood vessel, right, the general structure of a blood vessel is. And now we're going to take a closer look at the structures of arteries, veins, and capillaries. Once again, all right, please make sure that you know the terminology, understand the words and their meaning, that you obviously understand the work, and that you can also obviously use them. So guys, when we look at an artery, a vein, or a capillary, obviously these blood vessels, we looked at the general structure just before we had the break. Now, when we look at them, when you saw that diagram, all right, each of them don't have the same structure. Now, that sounds a little bit weird when I showed you the typical structure, but an artery needs to be slightly different than a vein, and a capillary needs to be different than a vein and an artery. So basically what we're looking at is like a model. We might have all three of those layers, right, differently, because a vein and an artery and a capillary are going to do things differently, structure versus function. So we're going to have a look at how can I identify an artery, how can I identify a vein, and how will I be able to identify a capillary. Okay, let's start off with arteries. Now guys, when we talk about an artery, right, I always try to think of the first function that I've put here. The function of an artery takes blood away from the heart. Now, A for away. Okay, now that is very important. Here I have my heart. Any blood vessel that goes away from the heart, right, is given the name of an artery. Now, the second most point is very often a lot of people say this. They say, arteries carry oxygenated blood. Yes, they do. However, that is not the correct definition of an artery, because there is this one little exception to the rule, and that is the pulmonary vein and the pulmonary artery. Those two take these rules and kind of like throw them out the window. What do I mean by that is, the pulmonary artery, okay, the pulmonary artery that goes away from the heart to the lungs. There's my lung, and I'm going to change my color. Have a look what blood it has. Right, it has deoxygenated blood. So unfortunately, when it comes to that terminology, we can't always use that term. So a more accurate definition is mostly oxygenated blood. Okay. Also, what will happen is, guys, arteries are under a lot of pressure. Why? What's behind them? A pump. Pump. So my arteries are really, they're pumping the blood. And you'll very often find that my arteries are deeper in my body. Why are my arteries deeper? My arteries are deeper to protect it. Because if I cut an artery, because of that, that high pump from the heart, the artery can squeeze. It's going to actually squirt blood out. And if I was to cut it, what will happen is I'd probably bleed to death very quickly. All right, so what do I do is I keep them slightly deeper in the body. If you go and look at all these over here that you can see on your arms, right, those are going to be the veins. Right, they're closer to the surface because they don't have this, right, dire need to be protected. Okay, so now if we have a look at an artery, we've got the three layers, right? So the first layer, very important. I'm going to go from the inside outwards. Nice, smooth endothelium, right? It's hollow over here because what's going to be in the middle over here is blood. This lovely, smooth squamous epithelium, but we call it endothelium. But what makes an artery so much, all right, when you have a look at a picture, you'll see it. It has this huge, big muscle layer. Why? All right? Why has arteries got this big muscle? What do? They must pump the blood to the rest of the body. So they've got the heart behind them, but they've got to get the blood from here all the way to the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. They've got to squeeze everything. They've got to make sure that they are able with this to move. How do I move things? Muscles. To move the blood around the body. So an artery, all right, so when we're looking at those three layers, it's got the lovely big collagen around, thicker, all right. It's got a much thicker muscle layer, and it's got the endothelium. So it's got those three layers. I just tweak the muscle layer so that I can get the blood around a little bit more. Okay, so that brings me now to veins. So here's my heart, all right, and let's change to, right, the blue. We can see for now. It brings blood back to the heart. So again, what's going to happen is, right, any kind of vessel bringing blood to the heart is called a vein. Now again, all right, like the arteries, it mostly pumps deoxygenated blood. And why do I say that? Here's my lungs, right, there's my lungs, the pulmonary vein. Right, the pulmonary vein brings in lovely, fresh, oxygenated blood. So that's an exception. That's why we can't do that. Okay. Now, guys, it seems quite funny for me because if I was to make a vein, I would put a large muscle layer in it, all right, to get it to actually squeeze back up again. But funny enough, all right, it doesn't. Let's have a look at the structure. If you have a look at the vein, right, it has a much larger opening, right? The blood goes through here. Now remember, it's got to come all the way up. So imagine your tiny little toe, it's got to come all the way up, all right? But look here, look at this very thin layer of muscle. A vein has a very thin layer of muscle in it, okay? I would have actually, if I were to have made it, I would have thought that veins would have had, all right, the muscle to get things up, but they don't. So the body has to compensate for it. So what happens is, it flows up, okay, but what have we got to do? We've got to stop it from flowing back again. So just like the heart, guess what we have? Right, we have valves. Veins have valves, right, to stop the backflow. All right, and you will also see very often veins run near a muscle. So when I do work, the muscle actually squishes it and it forces the blood upwards. Okay, so the veins got a little bit of help on that side. Now, unfortunately, females are prone to this, right? Sometimes we cross our legs and whatnot. It's a thing called varicose veins. And what happens is our veins get all funnily twisted, if I can say that. So over here, right, those what a normal vein would look like. Now what happens is the veins sometimes, all right, are not working as they should. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that. We call them spider veins. They form like little knobs, and you can see, all right, all the veins. They're not the arteries, they're the veins on your body. Quite a while back, you used to have them cut out, and now they can actually laser it, all right, and get those working quite nicely. So guys, have a look at this picture, all right, over here. I want you to have a look at this diagram and this diagram. Okay, this is an artery. This is an artery. Why? Beautiful, thick muscle and a very narrow lumen. Over here, look at the vein, all floppy, right, all floppy, wider, right, under less pressure. And if you have a look at these little ones, these are going to be your capillaries. Now, capillaries are the next thing that we're going to look at. Guys, this is when you get a bruise or anything, or the blood at the top, this is what you've broken, your capillaries. And they are very, 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 all right, thin. Oh, let me go back here. Okay, guys, 1 layer thick. 1 single layer of endothelium. Why don't we want muscle? Why don't we want? Because this is where movement, diffusion, osmosis, this is where that occurs. Any kind of movement occurs here. And if we want to, right, so if I go back to the function, anytime I want to move anything around, how would I want to do it easily? If it was made up of a single layer of cells. Okay, so just remember that. And then the last thing we have to look at is blood pressure. Now, I don't know if you've ever had your blood pressure measured, but why am I putting it in here with your arteries and veins? Guys, it's a machine that measures the pressure, all right, of your arteries against the wall, the blood pushing against your wall. We're going to have a look at this later on when we look at hypertension.